Vedanta and Vedic understanding of reality says that every word you utter is a thread you weave into the matrix of illusion. And only in silence can you know reality. So, of course, then, who am I speaking to right now? If by speaking I'm creating or expanding the web of illusion. Rumi famously said, God's language is silence. Everything else is a poor translation. But then after saying that, he went on to utter amazing poetry and philosophy and actually never stopped speaking. So let's kind of try and unpack this a little bit. That every word you utter is a thread you weave into the matrix of illusion. That only in silence can you know reality. So at first glance, this sounds poetic. Rumi was a great poet, of course, and enlightened as well. Yet when we look closely at how language, thought, and perception operate, and how the great contemplative traditions speak about silence, then this statement becomes less of a metaphor and more precise diagnosis. Language is not neutral. The moment we speak, we carve the seamless flow of experience into discrete objects, events, identities, me, you, success, failure, sacred, profane, divine, diabolical. Each word draws a boundary line across what is in itself undivided. So Advaita Vedanta names this play of division Maya, the power that makes the indivisible appear as many, the timeless appears as time-bound, the self appears as separate selves. Maya is not a thing, but a way of seeing, a lens of misperception. It operates through name and form, through stories we tell, and of course, we believe in. Modern cognitive science quietly confirms the same insight. Language does not just express perception, it actually shapes it. It constructs it. Studies of linguistic relativity show that the categories built into our language influence how we distinguish colors, track spatial orientation, and even experience time. Amazing, isn't it? Change the words people habitually use and you measurably change how they perceive and think. This means every sentence is not just a description of reality, it is a subtle act of construction. Each utterance reinforces certain distinctions: self, other, good, bad, past, future, until the conceptual map hardens into what we call the world or even the universe. So in this sense, every word becomes a thread. And together, those threads knit the shimmering, convincing fabric of the matrix. Matrix is what we're embedded in as body-minds. Matrix or Maya, or the world of matter. This is the seduction of conceptual reality. Most of us live almost entirely inside this woven world of names, interpretations, narratives. We do not meet raw experience, we meet our commentary about it. So, a simple example, somebody doesn't reply to your message, instantly words rush in: ignored, rejected, disrespected. These words generate an emotional reality that you then inhabit. The nervous system responds not to silence on the screen, but to the story. I'm not valued. Language has edited reality and then sold you the edited version as the whole truth. On a collective scale, entire cultures inhabit different worlds because their languages carve up reality differently. What counts as normal, sane, sacred, or possible is pre-filtered by inherited vocabularies. So the matrix is not just personal, it is civilizational. Advaita Vedanta would say, the more tightly you cling to these conceptual constructions, the deeper you sink into Maya, illusion. Not because the empirical world is evil, but because the mental overlay is mistaken for what is ultimately the real reality, truth with a capital T. So truth slips through our words. The problem is not that speech is bad and silence is good. The problem is that words belong to the realm of duality, while reality, as pointed by Advaita and also by Christian mystics and by Sufi poets, is fundamentally non-dual. To speak is to split. Every statement presupposes a knower and a known, a subject talking about an object. But the self, or Brahman, is not an object among objects. It is the ground in which all subjects and objects appear. As Ramana Maharishi put it, the self is beyond knowledge and ignorance because both belong to the mind. Both knowledge and ignorance belong to the mind. Ramana famously said, the only language able to express the whole truth is silence. So in his view, reality is so simple and immediate, that which is, that any attempt to wrap it in concepts introduces distortion. Silence does not explain the real. It refuses to misrepresent it. So mystics across traditions echo this. Christian contemplatives describe the deepest level of communication not as speech, but as communion. Not even as communication, communion, wordless, beyond words and beyond concept. They insist that the divine's presence is known in stillness. Be still and know that I am God. Not in the noise of constant mental commentary. When you try to verbalize non-duality, you struggle. But you smuggle in identity through the back door. The words oneness, self, and even God can easily become more threads in the matrix. New concepts the mind clings to instead of the living reality they were meant to indicate. So if language continually renews the spell of illusion, then genuine silence is the beginning of its undoing. But silence is here more than an absence of sound. It is the stilling of the inner narrator, this person inside you that is constantly speaking to itself and actually never shuts up. So silence is the suspension of compulsive labeling and interpretation. In this silence, attention is no longer captured by the latest story about you and your life. It relaxes back into its own source. The sheer aware presence in which thoughts, sensations, and words arise and vanish. This is what Ramana Maharishi called the natural state, where the self shines without obstruction. Gyan Yoga and contemplative prayer both emphasize this. To discern what is real, you must learn to abide as that which does not come and go. Everything that can be named is in flux, subject to time. Only the nameless witnessing presence remains constant. To rest there is to begin to know reality, with a capital R. Truth, with a capital T. Not as an idea, but as your own inescapable being. Therefore, only in silence can you know reality. It is not the silence that gives you new information. It subtracts illusion. It loosens the threads that language has woven until the underlying fabric, pure awareness, stands self-revealed. So, paradoxically, we are using words right now to argue the primacy of silence. This is unavoidable. As long as teaching appears in time, some use of language is necessary. Even the sages who praise silence still spoke when needed. The shift then is not to demonize speech, but to see through its hypnotic power. You can begin to use words lightly as provisional pointers rather than absolute truths. You can notice when language hardens into identity. I am this kind of person. The world is that kind of place. And gently question it. So in practice, this might look like building small islands of literal silence in your day. No phone, no music, no talking, just raw experience. And also into noticing the moment a story forms. Such as, this always happens to me, and silent or whatever story. So-and-so doesn't like me, so-and-so, dislikes me, so-and-so loves me, etc. So as soon as a story forms, one can silently ask, is that actually true or just a habit of language? Letting conversations include pauses so that silence, not just speech, participates. So I've noticed that, when you speak to great enlightened beings, before they answer your question, there's a moment of silence. So from there, the original statement is no longer a philosophy, but a lived recognition. Every word can indeed weave the matrix of illusion, unless it springs from and returns to the silence in which reality is already fully known. So, sorry for speaking these words on the threads in the matrix of illusion. How speech, silence, and reality are interwoven.